To bring in a special guest right now. Lisa Evers joining us on Live Now from Fox. Happy Sunday to you, Lisa. Nice to officially meet you. I know we've been in talks before, but my goodness, you've been covering this story. If you could kind of first just recap what's going on so we can understand and put things into perspective.
Well, Janae, imagine this. It's Friday. You're dropping off your little children, like we're talking under 1 year old, some 2 years old, at this daycare center in the Kingsbridge Heights section of the Bronx. And about 2:45, the officials say that they received 911 calls about the children being unconscious. And one mother had actually already picked up her 2-year-old and noticed that he was acting very, very lethargic. She called 911. Thank God she did, because he was saved. So when the first responders got there, they saw these babies, the one-year-old boy who died unfortunately from this. There was an 8-month-old girl, another 2-year-old, and they were all overdosing. An apparent overdose is something that unfortunately the paramedics and first responders here in New York City are very familiar with. In fact, within the last year, they've required all first responders, not just the paramedics, but even the firefighters, the police officers, any law enforcement, to carry Narcan or naloxone with them so that they could have it in the case of an overdose. So the first responders get there. They immediately set up a hazmat tent, a decon unit. They get in, they administer Narcan to the children. Unfortunately, this 1-year-old boy was actually about 21 months old. They could not revive him, so he passed away. So you can imagine the horror of all this. But then as the police investigation went on in full force throughout the afternoon on Friday, they found what they call a kilo press, which is used to make the bricks when they're packaging heroin and fentanyl. And a lot of the drugs that are being used and being sold, illicit drugs in New York City right now, as in many other parts of the United States, are heavily dosed with fentanyl. So they said that the 1-year-old, which the autopsy will be on Monday, to determine exactly what was the cause. It's an apparent opioid overdose caused by fentanyl. So they found the drugs. And then I'm just looking at the charges right now of the 2 people who were arrested. Late yesterday, police arrested a 41-year-old man, Carlisto Acevedo Brito, who lived in that building. He was one of the neighbors of the daycare center. And as you can see from the video that you're showing right now, this is very common in New York City in residential areas like this, where there'll be apartments above, and then on the ground floor, sometimes on the basement, there will be a daycare facility licensed. This one was licensed by the city and by the state. It was relatively new, had been licensed since last January, but it'll be right in that building. So this is a way for working parents to be able to drop their child off. Usually they feel very comfortable. They know the people. But this one was very new. But last night, the police arrested this neighbor, this 41-year-old man, and then also 36-year-old woman, Grei Mendez, who is the owner of the daycare center. They were charged with murder, depraved indifference murder, and many, many other counts, including manslaughter of a child under the age of 11, endangering the welfare of children. And then the other thing that tells me that there were a lot of drugs that they found there were multiple charges of criminal possession of a controlled substance. So we still haven't heard officially from the police what exactly they found there aside from this kilo press, but it sounds as if they also found quantities of drugs there. Now, Janae, the problem with fentanyl, which we have heard from medical experts, from public health officials, as you just heard in some of that press conference and briefing that you just played, and the DEA, I've done numerous interviews and shows on this. A couple of grains, the size of grains of sand, could cause you to overdose just being applied to your skin. So you can imagine with children ranging in age from 8 months to 2 years old, their poor little bodies and their systems, that's what could happen to an adult. Imagine what could happen to a little baby and to a child like that. So a tremendous amount of concern about that. In about 35 or 40 minutes, these 2 individuals who were charged with the murder and these numerous other charges, more than half a dozen each, they're expected to be formally processed, taken from the precinct into the legal system here in New York City, to be arraigned on these charges sometimes later today. But I mean, people in New York, let's face it, have heard everything. And with this one, though, is just really sent people into a state of shock and concern, but hopefully what'll come out of it is an awareness about just how common these drugs are, and also just how careful people need to be, because we're talking about, almost like dust. And in an enclosed building, it's an older apartment building with, you would presume not central HVAC systems. And you can imagine what could happen. But there's going to be a lot more to the story coming out, I'm sure. But very, very sad case, Janae.
I can only imagine. I mean, impacting people even outside of the Bronx area and other states hearing this. I mean, I know many people are asking this, is this the first time this type of incident has happened? Because it's very rare that someone would just decide to do drugs on this day and they haven't done it before. I know many parents are wondering, okay, were my kids exposed to this at this daycare other times?
Well, I think the thing is it's the close proximity, which we haven't been allowed in to see exactly just how close the daycare center is to this apartment where this drug mill was operating. Typically, what the drug distributors and the drug dealers will do on the wholesale level here in New York is they'll take over an apartment. In some of the suburbs, they've rented houses. They'll rent houses in quiet suburban areas, which they use as a drug mill. There have been numerous cases where the DEA and the NYPD narcotics have broken up these drug mills. They operate in apartment buildings, in apartments that are taken over by a drug dealer, a drug distributor. And they basically turn the inside of the apartment into a New Jack City type of operation where they're putting the drugs together, they're packaging them, and then they have people coming in different shifts with backpacks and taking out what they call the bricks, which are the packaged, packaged kilos of these drugs. And so this is the first time where we've actually heard it happen to this extent in a daycare center. We did have a case a couple years ago where a daycare center was actually serving as a front, where coming from another country, they were mailing stuffed animals that were literally stuffed with drugs, with cocaine and heroin inside the stuffed animals, and using the daycare center as a drop-off. And that owner was charged as part of that ring for receiving those packages. But the danger of this is definitely, it's known by first responders. A lot of first responders now, police departments around the country have had to be wary. We just had a case on Thursday here in an upstate area, much smaller city, Poughkeepsie, New York, where police were going to arrest a crack and heroin dealer and also fentanyl dealer. And then one of the police officers who was involved in the arrest in this area, in this place where the drugs were being dealt, actually caught an accidental overdose and had to be treated. Thankfully, he survived. We had cases that there was a case a while ago in a state prison in the Midwest where there was drugs being smuggled into the prison that contained fentanyl. There were over 24 overdoses in that particular case. So it's a very serious problem, especially because of the growing number of overdoses and also the growing use of fentanyl being put into so many other types of drugs as well, cocaine, crack, heroin. A lot of heroin contains a tremendous amount of fentanyl, and it's just a tremendous concern, because even if you're complete, like these babies and these families, these are working parents trying to drop their child off so they can go to work and support their family. And there's just a lot of cases of these accidental overdoses now, and this one tragically resulted in this baby's death. But I think you're going to hear a lot more about this, and a greater awareness about it too. But it's shocking, because you think, like, wait a minute, you're dropping your kids off at school, the daycare center's certified, it's licensed by the state, has all the permits and everything that they need, everything's certified. And this would be the last thing that any parent would, I think, would expect. And our hearts go out to these parents. And the little boy just looked like the most adorable kid. And by people who knew him, said he was so bright. Like, I mean, any child that's going, a couple months away from 3 months away from his second birthday is just so sad, Janae.
Absolutely. Lisa Evers, Fox New York, we appreciate your commentary and you putting everything into perspective. And of course, we'll be checking back in with you to see if there are any developments. You enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you so much. Great to be on with you.